In the 21st century, the way we make meaning in and from the world is not just print-based. The world is becoming increasingly digitized, and learners today function in an environment that contains multimodal communications. What is multimodal? Well, the word itself says several modes, which means students use a range of modes in their learning, which may include one or more of the following: written language, oral language, visual representation, audio representation, tactile representation, gestural representation, and spatial representation. One of the main ways to enhance student engagement is a multimodal focused approach in the classroom. For years, teachers in Victoria and throughout Australia have used a range of multimodal activities and resources to assist students to achieve learning objectives. Face-to-face presentations, visual material, paper-based assessments, online research, and group activities have been part of the classroom teaching for many decades. However, more recently, mobile technologies and collaborative web tools have expanded opportunities for learning. As a teacher in primary education, I must be mindful of the digital world in which my students live in and learn to integrate various technologies into their practice wherever appropriate. After watching the EED videos on engaging through ICT and ICT for learning, I pondered over the rapidly changing world that children live in today and the need for us to use ICT resources as part of the daily classroom activities. It also made me realize that the old concepts of teaching and learning are being challenged by a modern social and technological context. With technology being easily available and accessible both at and outside the school environment, classroom teachers have to meet the needs of keeping up with the knowledge of students and of digital advancement. As teachers, this transformation might be quite new and challenging and daunting at times. We can choose to look at this optimistically and creatively, or pessimistically and fearfully. Well, I choose the former. So what can I do to enhance learning in my classroom through multimodal pedagogy and the use of ICT resources? How do I know the right way of doing things? For starters, I can plan for implementing ICT in my classroom based on 3 principles. First, blended learning. Blended learning, as described by the Victorian Department of Education, is the effective combination of online and offline learning.
Which means, as much as I and my students love ICT resources, I should not let it take over all the classroom teaching, like this AI voiceover.
Second is personalization, which means I would want to use ICT in such a way as to allow my students to learn at their own pace, wherever and whenever they can, and with a personalized learning objective. The third principle is community, which addresses the high-impact teaching strategies of collaboration. The use of ICT in my classroom should enhance collaborative learning and allow students to learn through peer support and scaffolding. Looking back at the EED video on engaging through ICT, the teacher of East Doncaster Secondary College explains how the use of blogs and video tutorials engage students, which perfectly fits in these 3 principles. He uses classroom time for explicit face-to-face teaching, followed by students spending time on the blog, learning at their own pace, and with online peer support. There are several ICT resources available for the classroom. Keeping in mind the previous 3 principles, some of the tools that I would love to use in my teaching include Scratch, MapMake Interactive, Muse Lab, Chrome Music Lab, Google Arts and Culture, Adobe Spark. Well, the list goes on. Each of these can be used in the different subjects I would teach in my primary classroom. But while considering all these options, I will also need to keep in mind that the resource or tool which I use needs to be effective and implemented strategically for my particular lesson objective. Using the SAMO model will help me further reflect on the effectiveness of the resource. For example, I would like to use Scratch for a math class on BODMAS for year levels 5 and 6. I could use it as a tool of substitution, where I display a question on the screen and students write down the answer for it in their notebooks. It would definitely be fun and different from writing on a whiteboard, but has no additional function. I could use it also as an augmented tool, where I display an equation on the screen and allow students to select an option if it's right or wrong. This way, the students score a point for their answers, with the process being engaging and interactive, but still not functionally transformative. Then I could use it as a tool of modification to create a whole game of BODMAS questions with multiple levels that adapt to the specific needs of each child. I could also use it as a redefined tool by allowing students to access the BODMAS game as a worked example on Scratch and use the inquiry learning steps of predict, run, investigate, modify, and make to create their very own math projects on Scratch. This way, Scratch can be used as a tool of assessment of both math skills as well as technology and programming skills. Now, while there are several advantages and equally as many perceived disadvantages to using ICT as a multimodal approach in the classroom, the most pressing issue to consider would be ethics. Ethical use of ICT in the classroom would require teachers to explicitly teach students about the do's and don'ts while interacting with ICT. In order to get the most of ICT in the classroom, teachers as well as students must be aware of the whole picture and use resources to their advantage. In conclusion, being open-minded as a teacher and a constant learner who focuses on the why and how of using specific ICT resources, I can make my classroom have engaged in deep learning in an environment that reflects the bigger world outside the classroom walls.